It's a special meal just for you. Maybe your kids made you breakfast in bed. Maybe your parents made you something special every time that you came home for the weekend from school. Maybe your grandma made all of your favorites every time that you would visit. These meals mean something. Better than the taste of the food itself was the thought that was put into a meal like that that person had you in mind as they were preparing it. Today we celebrate Maundy Thursday, the day on which Jesus had a meal with his disciples, a Passover meal, the meal that for generations was used to celebrate God's deliverance of his people from slavery in Egypt. Only this particular Passover, Jesus was going to take that meal and he was going to turn it into something new. He said, "Take and eat, this is my body. Take and drink, this is my blood." It's a special meal that would celebrate God's deliverance from our slavery to sin and death and the devil. It is a special meal, but who is it for? Simply put, this meal is for you. Jesus said, "This is my body given for you. This is my blood poured out for you. Do this in remembrance of me whenever you eat and drink it." So it was clear that it was not only for the disciples there that evening, but it was for his church of all generations. And tonight we're going to look at a letter that Paul had written to a church in Corinth about 20 years or so after Jesus had instituted this Lord's Supper. And they were still having this meal because they knew that this was a special meal. Though there was some confusion over it. There was a lot of confusion in that church in Corinth over a lot of different things, and one of them was over communion. You see, among all the religions in the ancient world, Christianity was the only one that was classless. And by that, I mean that it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, if you were male or female, if you were a foreigner or a citizen, a slave or a free person. Nobody could lay exclusive claim on Christ because Christ had claimed all of them, that they all belonged. And so popping up in all of these different Christian churches throughout the ancient world, there were churches of people from all sorts of different backgrounds. That wealthy people and poor people and slaves and free people were all meeting together, and they were worshiping the Lord together, and they were rejoicing in Christ's forgiveness, and they were doing the work of the kingdom, and they were enjoying a meal together, just as it should be. But human nature, being what it is, favoritism soon began to creep in. There were certain members who were wealthy and maybe they contributed more to the church and to the ministry. Well, they got to sit at the head table and they got to eat first. And so they would have their fill, and then the poor people and maybe even some of the servants in the house, then they would get to come in and have the leftovers. Some people got a hold of the wine early, and some of them were even getting drunk on communion wine. Can you believe that? It'd be pretty hard to do that here at our church, the way that we carefully portion out every cup, and everybody gets the exact same amount, and even the bread comes pre-packaged and already a standard size and shape. But imagine if it was a free-for-all. That was what was going on in Corinth, and I kind of picture the table at the church in Corinth, kind of like the table when I feed my kids, and some of them are kind of arguing, well, hey, how come she got a bigger piece, and how come my cup is only this full, and there's more in theirs? It's kind of hard for us to imagine, but that's kind of what the problem was like in Corinth. They had some confusion over the Lord's Supper, and they were acting as if this meal were more for some than it was for others. So the Apostle Paul writes them a letter to sort this matter out. Actually, he had a lot of matters to sort out in this letter, kind of a church with a lot of issues there in Corinth, but he made sure to spend time on this particular issue, on how they're going to celebrate the Lord's Supper and who this meal is for. So tonight, as we take a look at these verses that Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, we're going to see who this special meal is for. It's for the church, It's for sinners, and it is for the self-examined.